Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about an anime movie that Cheryl has never actually heard of and knows nothing about. This is her first time hearing about it, and then we're going to have some fun with this. But we're going to be talking about the Jujutsu Kaisen Zero movie. It came out in theaters a little while ago. It released on Crunchyroll last month for people to view if you have, I guess, a premium subscription or whatever. So if you guys haven't seen it, we are going to talk spoilers. And because Cheryl hasn't seen the series, we probably won't get into spoiler territory for the series. We'll try to make sure we stay away from those, but definitely spoilers for the movie at the very least. So if you don't want to get spoiled, go check out that film and then come back and watch us what we have to say about it. But let's go ahead and just jump right into this. So I was really excited to talk to you about this film, Cheryl. So because of the fact that I purposely didn't tell you anything because I didn't want you to know anything because I wanted to know what your un tethered mind thought about this film as a film, not knowing anything before going into it, and then discovering what you discovered going out of it. So I want to just like kick it to you and just kind of hear what you had to say about it.
I was worried. I didn't read the synopsis. I just went into it because I like going into things without knowing anything. Um, but I was wondering because while I was searching for where to watch this, like where and how, I found that there was actually a series. So it got me worried that I would be seeing things that I didn't or that I wouldn't understand because I didn't watch the series. So I am curious about where this story falls into the series, but we can talk about that later. My first impressions, though, were I don't know. I just enjoyed it. It had like the perfect mix of humor and comedy and darkness and fighting. So it just felt like a very well balanced anime, and one of my favorite animes all time is One Piece, and I feel like it kind of embodies a similar, vibe, in the sense that it has like all these different elements in it, and it just was a lot of fun to watch. In terms of like the I mean, I don't know, I'm not really sure what you're asking me.
I was asking what your experience was, like story, characters, like yeah, what like how did you connect with it? Yeah, I get that you're saying that you kind of enjoyed just like the pacing of it and how it flowed as a movie. But yeah, but like the overall story that happened in the movie and like the characters that you met along the way, the relationships, like yeah, like what was just how are you connecting with like Yuta and Rika's story, who are like Yuta's the main character of the film, and at the beginning ish he there's a tragedy that happens to like his childhood friend and love interest, and she becomes a curse. But yeah, and then it kind of goes from there. But like, yeah, well, how did you like kind of connect with that character and Maki and the other the other uh, high schoolers?
I mean, it definitely felt like, oh, this is a typical anime kind of structure where you have like the hero who is very special and is gonna come out at the end being like the best. That is so anime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't mind it. I love that kind of stuff. But then there's also like this cool, magical world. Like it's not just the, regular people. There's this whole like universe that exists in the real world, and that's another thing that I, kind of like. And then in terms of like the other students, I like one of the things that I wrote down in my notes is like I really enjoyed the character development and I found that it was very impressive how well fleshed out and you know uh, just that everyone got like a good amount of time to for us to get to know, and I thought that it was really impressive how they were able to do that in such a short time. Because usually,
Yep.
you know, I was really thinking to myself in like the middle of the movie, like, how are they gonna do this in like the span of a movie? Like how, because I was watching this and I was like, this feels like it could be a series in itself. Like I can keep watching these characters more and more and more and see them develop even more. So I was just kind of surprised how um, like it was so contained, but I got to know all these characters so much with the like everybody's backstories, Maki's backstory, with like her being like kind of like an enabled sorcerer, but she's still like doing her best. But that's what makes her special is her
Mm-hmm.
determination um, to to be successful and explain why she's so hard on the outside because she needed that. She needed to be strong on the outside or at least appear strong on the outside because she was so put down in her childhood. And then you have this mysterious Inumaki, I think is his name.
Yeah, Inumaki.
Um,
Yeah.
and he come yeah exactly he reminded me of that character what's his name the character in Naruto the
Shino.
yeah
Aburame
the
Shino.
bug guy
Yeah.
and I was like oh
I got you. I
what's he
know.
hiding under there and Naruto but I was just like I knew that that he was hiding something. I knew that the teacher was hiding something. He reminded me of Kakashi a little bit,
Yeah.
and I was like, "There's probably something special with his eyes, of course. That's why he's
Hmm.
hiding it." And so there's like all these like little elements that I see that that are kind of nostalgic for me because they remind me of other elements that I've gotten from other anime. And
Hmm.
like even though they're similar, they're still unique and they're still put in a way that like excites me and that is made interesting to me. So yeah, I mean overall I thought it was a really good self-contained movie.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. So, like, I've seen the movie twice now. That was my second time watching it for the purposes of this discussion, and I had a different relationship with coming into the movie because I'll talk about my first experience seeing the movie because I saw it in theaters. I had watched the series first, and the I when I heard that a movie was coming out, I didn't immediately get excited because in my experience, I have seen so many Naruto and Bleach films that don't tie into the actual story at all, and even if the movies end up being cool, they end up not really being required viewing because they're not canon and they don't matter. Same thing with Dragon Ball Z. Like Dragon Ball Z was probably the first time I had seen a bunch of different like non-canonized movies that take place with these characters in this world with having only I think there's only two canonized films for Dragon Ball Z. I think that was Tree of Might and History of Trunks. But I have been kind of conditioned to not expect much from anime movies. And so when I went into this film, I was suspecting it to be like some of the other films I had seen in the past, where it was just like, okay, it'll probably be a fun ride, but it's not as inconsequential and whatever, because I didn't know what I found out later. And so when I watched the film, I was enjoying myself because also Maki is my favorite character from the series. And so I was happy to see her kind of get some more play in this movie. And then that's when, after I finished the film and I was enjoying myself, I think it was actually while I was watching the film, I started to realize something. I said, wait a second, this is starting to feel like it actually matters based on the things that I'm seeing and the people that I'm meeting. And that's when I found out, and I'll confirm it for you right now so that you know what you just watched. This film is the beginning of the entire series. That's why it's called Zero. This is actually the starting point. And it was a manga at first as well. I think it was a one shot, but it might have been like a limited series manga. You guys in the chat can like let me know what the facts are on that one. But it was a manga, and they basically turned the manga story into the film. But this is this part that this movie takes place a couple of years before, or maybe like I can't remember how many years. It might be a year or two, but I believe that it takes place a couple of years before the actual series begins. So,
Okay. I was gonna ask about that actually. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I because when I was watching this, I was like I said, it felt like this could go on and on and on. Like this
mhm,
could be an anime, and I wanted to see more. I was like, I don't want like I thought like maybe like how is this gonna end? I was and at the end I thought that maybe gosh I can't even remember the main character's name right now.
mhm,
But I thought there was potential for him to die because of the fact that it's a movie and that if this
mhm.
is a movie that's part of a series, then like maybe this character cannot exist
Exist, right?
um, because then how can the series exist? But then I remembered that in the title there is a zero, so I was like, is this a prequel? And I was like, if this is a prequel, but even if it wasn't a prequel, I was interested in just the way that the world building was really good, so it got me interested in like just wanting to see more of this world and these characters. I really like the characters. I was like, of course there's a panda that can talk, of course there is, but
And they also don't bring up any answer for that, right? Like they just skip over it. And I love that even in the movie itself, like Utah's just like he didn't give me the one little bit of information I actually wanted.
yes.
Explain the talking panda.
Yeah. But yeah, no, glad to know that it's a prequel. That makes sense to me, and yeah, I'm kind of excited. Like, I'm definitely gonna start watching the series now,
Yes.
because I think this movie really hooked me. Um, and by the way, the animation is beautiful. It looks so good.
And here's the thing about the animation that is what I love. So it's done by Studio Mappa, who are they? These are the this is the studio that took over for the final season of Attack on Titan, when Studio went and didn't come back. And so the cool thing about the animation is that that level of quality does not drop in the series. Like so often when we see anime movies, the quality in the anime movie is higher than the anime itself. That's not the case, and it might not be the case for more modern day anime. Like I see a lot of people in our chat talking about the My Hero Academia movies, talking about how those are canonized and also like the quality of those. So maybe at some point we want to go ahead and visit those movies as well. Although I do know some like a lot of those movies do take place like during the middle of like seasons or in between seasons and stuff like that. So that one might not be as like accessible immediately the way Jujutsu Kaisen Zero is, but that might still be something we can still like figure out and talk about in the future. But that quality that you're talking about from animation and from music, because the music is also very top notch, that continues into the series itself. So it really does feel like when you watch this movie and then go into the series, it doesn't actually feel like there's anything that gets taken away. It feels like a seamless transition, and I think that's one of the great parts about how this movie was done and how the series itself is done.
That's good to hear that they are that the show itself is this level of quality because I think that like not that I enjoyed it because it looks good, but it definitely made me feel like um, the look and feel of it was really good, and that's just part of why I was so captured by it. I mean, to me, it doesn't really quite matter how good or bad the animation is, but it definitely adds to it. Um, so I'm kind of excited for that, and the music too, like you mentioned. I actually really like the music, and I just left the credits on because I liked the
Yes.
song at the end as well. I was like, geez, this music for the movies this week are very
Good.
good.
Yes, I like letting the credits play too, and then obviously, and you have that little after credit sequence at the end of the movie as well. So yeah, like the going into this movie, I'm glad to hear that it made you want to watch more because I think that's part of the charm about this movie is that it is such a great jumping on point for someone that hasn't seen the series. Now, like I said before, me and a lot of the people in chat, we had seen the series first because the series was made first, and then saw the movie later. And now, but now for somebody like you who's new to it, have an entry level that can seamlessly take you through the chronology of the story. And like they clarified in the chat, like so this movie is 1 year prior to the series, but a lot of the characters that you see in the movie do appear in the show. But the nice thing about it is just that there's a couple of things that you get to benefit from if you've seen the series. Like there are certain characters that you see, like there's this guy that has glasses that you see fight at some point, and he has like kind of this wrapped up like hatchet looking thing. Like he's a main character that you meet in the series, but he has like very few lines of dialogue in this movie. But he's kind of one of those characters just like, oh, you've seen the series, you know who this is. Some of the other characters they show us the same kind of feeling, so it kind of rewards you for your knowledge of these characters from the series. But it takes it a step further because there are characters in this movie that I have not met in the series that apparently appear in the manga. So my friends that read the manga are now seeing these characters that have not been animated for the first time in this movie, and so now there's an extra little bit of, and this is for you manga readers out there. Here's something a little extra for you to enjoy. So this movie does a very good balance of newcomers, old comers, and old school like comers. So, and I think that that's it's really impressive when a movie can juggle that many different audience types for a genre of film.
Okay, that's what I figured. Because I do remember seeing like a whole bunch of characters at the end in the fight when they recruit everybody, and then there was this woman with the braid, that blonde woman with the braid,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, she seems important, but we only see her a little bit, and then like the other guy with the glasses, you said, he also stood out to me, and it's funny because they both stood out to me, so I feel like they did a good job balancing like because to me it felt like they were just showing me like, oh, there are other people that exist in this world and here they are, and
Right.
like look, they're really cool and they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it did feel like I was getting the right amount of spotlight for all the characters, even the ones that we didn't necessarily need to know for this movie specifically. But I think it kind of helped me to know that there was a series that exists already, so it didn't feel like I never
Right.
questioned why am I seeing these characters that I have not been introduced to yet. Like suddenly they're just in the movie. I never felt that way.
Right. No, and I'm glad that that was the case. So one of the things that I noticed watching it a second time, like you were talking about how when you watched the movie you felt like it could have been like a series, and when watching it a second time, I actually saw that structure more. I don't know if you noticed it as much your first go through. You could tell me, but it felt like almost that the series, like the movie, was separated into episodes. I could see the points where the episode would break and the new episode would begin, like a fade out here and the fade up, and like, okay, this is the new episode. And even when I did the math, the movie's about an hour and 45 minutes. So like on average, that's about 25 minutes an episode. So it's like it's like a four episode, nearly 2 hour film. And so like I was like, okay. So and then when you look at how it's structured, act one, or there's going to be more than three acts, but let's just for the sake of breaking this up, we'll say four acts. But like, so the act one or episode one is the kind of introduction and working with Maki for the first time. Then episode two is working with Inumaki and getting to meet that character, and that's why you were talking about how like characters got a lot of room to like have character development, because it's almost like they got their own episode with Yuta to kind of get to know him and for him to get to like grow alongside them. And then the last two episodes are basically the final arc, which is the battle, like the first like instigation of and declaration of war, and then the final like thing of like now we're actually doing battle. And that's kind of how it's broken up, but it works and it flows pretty nicely to the point where like the pacing feels good. And I feel good about not only getting to know characters like Maki and learning about her. You learn a lot about Maki in this movie, but you also learn a lot about Inumaki even when he's not on screen, because Yuta has this moment where he copies Inumaki's ability and does it, and after he does it, he's like, "That was really hard. I don't like. How does he do this all the time? That man is amazing." And all of a sudden, you just in that little bit of a moment, you got an extra little bit of information of just how awesome like this character that we've been following actually is. And that's one of the things that I really like about the film, is like taking these little moments to like sprinkle in extra information or extra feelings of badassery for like the characters that we meet.
Yeah, and the thing that I really like about Inumaki is that that is a reasonable time to actually shout out your ability and like what you're about to do.
Yes. 100% true. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and then so like just talk about Yuta a little bit and talk about like the actual like stuff that happens in the film. We talked about briefly how Yuta has this whole thing where the girl that he loved gets they believe at first that she curses him when she dies, and that's why she becomes a curse that follows him and is attached to him. And he has this moment where he has a lot of growth. He starts off as this kind of weak-willed character, and he kind of has to get shaken up a little bit by like Maki and the other people around him. And there's a little bit of a time skip. There's like a 3 month time skip in the movie, but I like it because it shows it. It doesn't just make him so that he's automatically better just out of nowhere. It realistically shows that he's been training, getting his butt kicked a little bit. He actually has a fight with Maki where he just is constantly getting like beat, and even when he thinks that he wins, like she still like gets one over on him. And I like the fact that they showed him training and failing and having to like learn and get better. And yes, he does get a kind of anime power up near the end of the film, but then that does come after we've can assume that he's had a lot of time, or at least within 3 months has had this time to kind of like train and develop. He also has this super powerful, uncontrollable controllable ability, and we know that it's super powerful because that's the whole reason the main villain wants to kill him or to take him. It's because he wants that power. So his power is directly tied to the goal of the villain. And so that's another reason why the structure of the movie works, is because the hero has what the villain wants. And so right away we already have a conflict that's going to carry us through the film, even though we don't meet the villain like face to face, I think, until like the second,
Halfway.
yeah, or halfway
It's like
through, yeah.
halfway, yeah. Which I also thought was surprising. That like, well, I mean, initially I didn't feel like it was surprising because the flow was so natural to me that
Hmm.
that I didn't really pick up on the fact that we didn't meet the villain or get introduced to the villain until like the halfway point. And and there's time skips like you said, so I also picked up on the fact that they responsibly explained his skill improvement, and
Hmm.
that's another thing that I thought was kind of nice for this movie is the fact that like it's a short movie, but then they skipped to the right points of times for the time. There's like two time skips, and I think that they skipped to like exactly the right moment to give us the information to push the story along without giving us like frivolous things that we didn't really need and interrupt the flow of the storytelling. Even though like it did feel like the last one did feel a little bit abrupt because the villain was like, "All right, on December 24th is when I'm gonna do the thing," and I'm telling you ahead of time, which I thought was weird.
Hmm.
But then I guess it kind of makes sense because he was basically setting up a trap for them.
He wanted to pull them away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, like, literally the next thing that happens is, all right, and there's a card that tells you, now it's December 24th. So I was almost like, why doesn't he just say tomorrow? And, like, but then again, it does give time in between to show that, it's Utah, right, has
Yuta. Hmm.
more time to develop his skills. So his skill progression is explained away by the time jumps.
Exactly. And another thing that this movie handles, which I was kind of surprised by, was that there's actually some room for development for the villain himself in this film too. So one of like I think it's a very interesting concept, and it got me really thinking. But you potentially have a main villain in this film that is weaker than the strongest hero. Like Ghetto is told and called to be a not so strong sorcerer, which is why he has to collect all these weak curses. I think he even mentions that himself. And you get the feeling that if he was in a one-on-one fight with Gojo Sensei, the guy that has the blindfolds on, he's going to lose. And you get a sense that Gojo is just super, super strong. Like, you already know he's probably going to be, and if you watch the series, you know even more. But, like, without that knowledge, you still kind of get the sense that he's strong, and they showcase his power very much in this film. When he is not, like, messing around, people are getting destroyed, buildings are getting destroyed. He is a force to be reckoned with. And you never get the sense that Geto could really hang with him. And I thought that that was interesting that Geto is essentially a villain that's weaker than the strongest hero. But because of that, it means that Geto has to be smart and underhanded and conniving, which is why he does these whole kind of like tricks and traps and goes and is going through so much effort. It's basically an all or nothing pitch to get Yuta's ability so that he can shift the tide of battle. And even when he has to, like, he's like calls out that war and has to leave, and they're like, "You think we're gonna let you leave?" The whole reason he gets away isn't because he's able to fight his way out because he just saw that he's super powerful. It's because he's like, "Hey, I could kill your students, and yeah, you might still kill me, but I'm gonna kill your students before you kill me." And then it's just like, all right, well, I guess we gotta let him go then. So I like that dynamic. I didn't realize that how much I would like that dynamic because normally we see the opposite of just like a villain that is just so much like an overwhelming force for most of the heroes in the show. But to have like a villain that cannot actually hang with your strongest hero is a cool concept for me.
Yeah, and he even tells like his team like they have like like a 20 to 30% chance of winning the war.
Yeah. Right? They know they're gonna lose.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then he was like, but it hangs on this one thing that we do, and if we accomplish that, then we're definitely gonna win. So it's all about that. So I thought that was like a really cool conversation that they added to the movie because it just really showed um, what like not what the odds are, but just like the comparison of what he has, like what his skill is, like in terms of power and people. I thought it was weird at first, but then it makes sense. Like because he's doing all these like traps. Like the plan is to not beat them with power, but with wit. So, but even at that, it's still like 30% chance. So we're just betting, putting all our eggs in one basket here.
Right? And then they still try to make it so that you understand he's still like he's a terrible person, like he looks down on humans, but they show that he's kind of like got a Magneto quality to him where he like Magneto respects mutants and wants mutants to be able to live in peace and harmony. He sees that for Jujutsu sorcerers. And even with his colleagues, he doesn't try to just sacrifice them. They're all given a time frame that says, "Hey, all you're doing is stalling until this time and then you're expected to run away." And then all of them run away and all of them survive because of that. So he's not even a villain that is so willing to just sacrifice his pawns or like colleagues to serve his goal. And I think that, so what you're creating is a layered villain in in a hour and 45-minute movie where we also don't meet the villain until halfway. So I was like, I think that that's very impressive. And regardless of what you know about the fate of that character or whatnot, I appreciate the fact that that character was given that amount of depth in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the whole thing about him being like Magneto because I think you're right. You're absolutely right. It's pretty spot on because he's even old classmates with the teacher, and he even says like he was my best friend or he is my best friend. So or like it's implied that they were best
Yeah.
friends. So so I thought that was kind of nice too because it paints what's his name, Geto,
Mm-hmm.
as not just a villain because initially I felt like he seemed very one dimensional
Very
evil.
villainous, yeah.
Yeah, but then at the end, like the longer the movie went on, the more we got to know that character, the more I was like, oh, actually, he has a lot of layers too. Like he's not just some evil person, but he's actually someone that like even our heroes care for.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And Playman, we'll talk about that in our segment offline. But do you have anything else that you wanted to say about the film? We're running up a little bit on time here. Was there anything else in your notes that you wanted to just get out?
I
We covered
just
a lot.
I was laughing because there was that whole part about Rika, like she basically proposes, and then
Yes.
I was like, oh, that's a good way to like be scary. And they like have like because she turns into like a curse monster, and then she
Mhm.
repeats it like "Let's get married," and she says it in like a hella scary voice, and it was like, yeah, that's why all the guys have commitment issues.
What I love is that two things. I do like how that he basically gives her himself to her at the end, and is like, Geto's like, "Oh, you're such a womanizer," and he's like, "No, it's actually true love, and that's what the power is." And she's like so happy when she like has that confirmation. But I love my favorite moment in the film is actually when Yuta rescues his friends once they basically get messed up by Geto, and he starts to heal them, and Rika takes um Maki and is like shaking her. And he looks at her like, yo, you better be careful with that woman because she saved my life. You better treat her as delicately as a butterfly. And he has that look in his face like, I will mess you up. And then now this horrific demon that we saw like literally murder things is like afraid and scared and sad at Yuta and then like starts begging for his forgiveness. I love that moment so much because it shows not only his respect for Maki for what she's done for him and how he views her, but also it shows his growth as a character to where he can even stand up to this demon that he has been associating with all the negative things that's happened to him to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little weird about like that. That moment was a little weird for me, just
Mm-hmm.
because it just, I just didn't really see Rika as the type of character to be jealous.
Jealous? Oh yeah.
So because they didn't ever show that before, like, and they just seemed her. They make made her seem like a very well liked person, so who only wants like the best for him. So for her to have that moment of jealousy kind of just seemed a little out of character for me. um but I also get that like they were trying to show like the not just the bond that he had with Maki and his growth as a character, but his current relationship with Rico, which is
Yeah.
like it's and I think that's the other thing that bothered me is because she was so worried about his opinion of her that made her apologetic, which I didn't really like as a female, as just like a woman, I'm like, why you gotta be like that? Like, don't be like that. And so it just in that sense felt weird to me.
Right. I
Like
think what
if
they were
like
going
if
for there.
I was just gonna say, like, if the love was real, then there would be no worry between either of them.
Yeah, but so the thing to remember is that she's not like a one-to-one counterpart of her human self. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
forget, like earlier in that same movie, she's tearing apart a demon and being excited while she's doing it.
That's
Right?
true.
She's like bathing in the blood. So the whole thing about it is like kind of the curse kind of warps who you were, which is why she doesn't even have her human form as well. It's not until the curse is released that she becomes a human and also just kind of becomes more kind of human-like. She's kind of a monster that is like immature throughout the entire film. So I think because we saw that immaturity kind of on display when they had to save the kids and she came out and was just like super excited about murdering a monster and was just like yeah 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 and like having fun. I think that what I read from that is that this incarnation of her is immature and basic. And so that's why the stuff of her being jealous or her being subservient, like kind of like played to me. But then, by the end when she turns into a human, she's she's a regular person and she is actually telling him to be strong and he's like leaning on her and talking about how he like misses her and how he's sorry because you find out that he's the one that cursed her. And then she even has this nice moment where she like does like kind of forgive him and whatnot and then tells him don't come over here too soon. And and you do get the sense that she does love him in that moment. So like I did like think that that was a nice little moment as far as the conclusion for the two of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like that ending part. and that because I was worried. I was like, oh, does that mean Utah's gonna die now? I was like,
Right?
dang, they made me like this character, and it's only gonna just be for this one movie.
Movie? Yeah, I know.
No, but Playmat made a good point of that jealousy is a monstrous quality. So I, that's a good point. I think that putting it that way, I think then it does make sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But anything else before we get out of here?
Nope, sorry, I forgot about the time.
Yeah, it's all good. No, we need. I think that was good. I'm glad we got that for our YouTube segment. But if you guys want to hear us talk about this and more, you guys can check us out on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/33films. It'd be great to see you over there. We continue our conversations about the movies that we talk on the YouTube segment, as well as other things. Talk about what we're going to be doing in the future. But come over there if you want to say hi. But yeah, what did you guys think about Jujutsu Kaisen Zero? Have you seen the series? Is this your first time ever seeing Jujutsu Kaisen at all? Is this an entry way for you? Do you think that now that you've seen the movie, do you want to see the rest of the series? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.